It's great to be here with you guys on Halloween or All Hallows Eve, whatever you want to call it. My most ridiculous costume, since I didn't get to tell you guys, was that I have actually never dressed up for Halloween my entire life, ever. It's sad, right? Like I grew up, anybody that kind of grew up in the 80s, like the Christians in the 80s thought that everything was like demonic or spooky, and Halloween was definitely Satan's birthday, so we definitely weren't like going to celebrate that. We reserved all of our like celebration for like Christmas and Jesus' birthday, not Satan's birthday. So I didn't dress up. Or you could count like about once a week or so I dress up like a golfer because I can't play golf, but I dress up like I'm one. I always got to get like some golf stuff in every time I speak. I don't know why. I gotta stop. I'm not doing it next time. I promise you. Next time I'm here, I won't make any golf comments at all because I don't know. Does anybody else golf in here? Can I see a show of hands, golfers? There's like 4 of you that actually even pay attention when I'm saying that. So, but it's really good to be here. And I don't know if you guys have ever been in a situation where like you had to get ready for a project, maybe to present something at work, and it just never really made sense in your head. Like you couldn't get it to be like what you wanted it to be. And then you were standing in front of the people and you had to give it to them. Like that is me right now. Like, or you just like, you're like, I gotta give this project and I have to do it. And people are watching online, those of you watching online, hi, and people are looking to you to know something. And you're like, I just don't know if I know it. I'm not sure. So this is what we're gonna do today. I'm gonna try something today that's either gonna be really amazing or super terrible, which is how most really terrible or amazing things happen. It's just how it is, right? So what I want us to do today is throughout the time that I'm talking, I want us to like take some time to talk to each other, not like you guys talking to me. Obviously, you guys talking to each other. You got masks on, so you'll be fine. When I had the chance a couple years ago to go to Israel, and one of the things that I found fascinating about like seeing the ruins in Israel is that the places where they gathered for their spiritual community, they weren't like this. It wasn't like a stage and like chairs for one person to stand at the front and talk to everyone. They were actually in circles. It was like they were gathered around each other so that they as a community could figure some things out together. And I think that like what we've been talking about over the last several weeks is something that I think we all have to figure out together. Like when you're talking about like unfinished hurt, when you're talking about grief, when you're talking about really, really dark things, I don't think those are things that any one person can stand and tell you about in a way that's going to actually help you heal. I think really the only way that you can actually see healing and hurt be resolved and grief be resolved is if you do that in the safety of community. So what I'm going to ask us to do today a few times is that we look at each other, that we talk to each other, that we share with each other. Those of you, I'm not asking you guys to share anything today that's like super deep and vulnerable with a stranger. Like I'm not asking you to tell someone your deepest, darkest secrets today. Like you may even not even feel safe enough to say anything. You may just say, yeah, I got some stuff going on, which is fine. We're gonna do it at the end. At the very end, I'm just letting you know now, at the very end, we're gonna do that today. We're gonna share some things with each other. But before we get into the like really heavy, deep stuff, like, let's just practice it, all right? Can we do that? Why don't you already did this with your costumes. Why don't you look at somebody near you and take like a minute and a half and talk about your favorite, not Halloween candy, because that makes no sense. It's not Halloween candy. It's candy. Twix does not become Halloween candy on October 31st. It's still a Twix or a Snickers or Twizzlers or whatever it is. I want you to talk about your favorite candy, period, and how much you hate candy corn for a minute and a half, and then I'll be back. All right, all right. That felt like, all right. It's going to be hard to get y'all back now. Y'all like talking to each other. All right. Y'all really like talking about candy, man. That's super cool. All right. Oh, man. I want to take some time since it's Halloween weekend, right? And I want to talk about for a second how interesting it is that Halloween kind of represents that we as human beings, we need to find a way to deal with scary and dark and painful. And it also, the fact that I never did Halloween growing up and that many of you may have not done Halloween growing up, it speaks to one of the issues in the Christian community, is that I think we have a hard time with dark and scary and painful and grievous. And so we go, we're not going to do anything with that. That belongs over there with the Satan. We're not going to actually, like Halloween and all of that stuff, we push it over there. And we try to make up new ways, like, Halloween festivals or fall festivals or costume parties. Or one of my favorites that I've seen this year is Jesusween. There's an actual website you can go to that is Jesusween, where Christians have tried to take Halloween back or redeem it in some way. And the irony is that it's actually been a spiritual practice for a very long time. It was a way that people actually processed the dead. The idea that every one of us dies. The idea that there is the existence of a good and powerful and gracious and kind God, and the existence of grief and sorrow and death and pain. That we as human beings have to we have to sit in that sometimes, and oftentimes that's called that causes what's called an existential crisis, which I had about 6 months ago, where you find yourself sitting in the middle of things that don't really make sense. Like, if God is so loving and so kind, then why is it that this thing happened? And I think that the story that you've been going through, or that we've been going through here in Canvas over the last couple of weeks when looking at this story in John chapter 11, was the story of one of Jesus's friends who actually gets really, really sick and dies. And what we see early on in this story is this idea that, if there is a Jesus who's all powerful, why is my brother, this is Martha and Mary speaking, why is my brother dead? When you could have actually done something about this, how is it that this darkness exists, but you're supposed to be the light? John, the writer of John, which would make sense because it's John. Every one of the writers of the Jesus story have different things that they're trying to communicate. And John writes this story that he writes, his Jesus story, he writes some probably 30 or so years after the rest of them had written and after these events had took place that he was an eyewitness to. And John focuses from the very beginning of his writing. If you look at John chapter 1, he's talking about Jesus being light. And you see in John chapter 11 that this light shows up again. And so here is Mary and Martha saying, if you're light and good and kind and awesome and powerful, then why is my brother dead? And the other thing, I need to tell you this. I have a lot of thoughts that I want to share. One of the reasons why I'm having such a hard time with this, because I have so much I want to say about this story, because it's freaking awesome what happens. But so bear with me if I jump around a bit. You'll have to just kind of stick with me. And if I do move too fast and you want to slow me down, you could raise your hand. No, don't do that. Just watch the tape and rewind it, I guess. So it's this. If you are light, why is there dark? And the other thing about this story that I find fascinating, and we'll get to the end, it's pretty cool, is that there are groups of people that are in this story that are there from the very beginning. They're there on the road, they're there at the rock, and they'll be here at the resurrection. That there are these people who play a significant role in this story that we in the West miss almost every time we look at this story. Because you see, we in America live in this society where we celebrate folks that do things by themselves. We celebrate the stories of people who had nothing and all by themselves, pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and did something really great. That's what we celebrate, individualism. I do well because you don't do well. In order for my business to succeed, your business needs to not succeed. Now, I know that's making it really simple, but that's a part of what's woven into how we operate is in a very individualistic way. But the Jewish people, certainly the ancient Jewish people, did not operate that way. In fact, at the very beginning of this story that John tells, he uses this word village to describe where Lazarus was. Village, meaning a bunch of people who cooperated and needed each other. They didn't just live in proximity to each other. They actually needed each other. They actually relied on each other. And we see from the very beginning that this communication, that there are people who are relying on each other that have experienced a loss, that are experiencing grief. And as we move on into the story, if you read this in any sort of like Jewish reading, you'll see that Mary is sitting Shiva. Anybody ever heard that term before? Sitting Shiva. Raise your hand if you've sitting Shiva. So those of you that don't know what sitting Shiva is, it is a Jewish custom of grief that's about a week long where they spend time in community remembering the person who is gone. And I think it's really cool that it's called sitting Shiva because it is this idea that you slow way down and sit. That you don't try to excuse the grief away or try to pray the grief away or pray the pain away or get so busy that you forget you're in pain. And this is a little bit of my own story. Is that my body was telling me, you need rest. And I just kept going. Just kept running, just kept moving. And don't you know what that is? That you get on this hamster wheel and you have to keep going. There's always food to be made or kids to be tended to or work to go to or a project that's due or someone saying something on Instagram I got to argue with them about. There's always something happening I have to attend to. There's always something going on. And in the midst of those things going on, we find ourselves with unfinished hurt because we don't sit, we run. And we find Mary sitting Shiva. And she's not sitting alone. She's sitting with people who are so invested in the process of going through her grief with her that in this story, if you read it in John chapter 11, it says she got up to leave to go meet Jesus and they thought she was going to the tomb to grieve there. So what did they do? In America, I would imagine sometimes, given our fast-paced individualistic society, if I go grieve somewhere else and you might just say, okay, I'll see you when you get back. But they said, no, we're going to go with you because you don't grieve alone. You don't sit Shiva by yourself. We all do this together. So they all got up and they all went out to meet Jesus. And Mary goes out here, and you guys have been hearing this. I'm just kind of recapping this for those of you that haven't been here for the whole series, which may be some of you. She goes out and repeats this theme that we see in John chapter 11, which is, if only you had been here. Jesus, if only you had been here, this awful, terrible thing would not happen. But what's beautiful in this is that they don't seem to be really, I don't know what word, I almost used the word for angry. I'm not sure I can use in church. They don't seem peeved. The other P word, I feel like that's safe to use. They don't seem that mad. They seem like they have. In fact, since they were sitting Shiva, you didn't sit Shiva until after 4 days. So after 4 days with the person being dead, so they had started to at least in some way make peace with the fact that something terrible happened. And now we do what we do as ancient Hebrew people, ancient Jewish people. We in our village come together to help resolve the pain together. See, there's this this theme kind of woven throughout Scripture, even going back to the First Testament. There are stories that are about hospitality that we thought were about different things, stories that are about community and village and taking care of strangers and foreigners and people that because of our lens that views things through my individual relationship with God, we oftentimes miss the communal aspect of them. So one of those stories is actually the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Did you know that? Did you know that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is actually way more about hospitality than it's about anything else? That the story of Sodom and Gomorrah wow, that sound effect got me. That got me. that in this story, and you guys, you guys have to look up Sodom and Gomorrah on Google because I can't tell you exactly where it's at in the Bible, but I know you guys all know that the Sodom and Gomorrah story is in the Bible, and you'll find at the beginning of this story that that there is a mistreatment of the two strangers that come into the city. And you find that when these two strangers show up at Lot's house, this story is actually in Genesis. Now I remember now. They show up at Lot's house, and Lot says, "I'm going to give you." Like all these people show up at Lot's house to basically take the strangers and do bad stuff to them. And later on, okay, so then Jesus comes along and Jesus tells this story, and he says if he said to his disciples who are about to go out and interact with people, here's the line Jesus uses. He says, "If they do not welcome you, let it be worse for them than it was for Sodom and Gomorrah." Jesus makes this connection between how you treat someone, how you embrace people in community, and Sodom and Gomorrah. Because people who, and there's another story Jesus tells, there's a story about the thief at midnight. Or not a thief at midnight. There's a different story about a friend at midnight. And every time I've heard this story, I've been like, yeah, if somebody shows up at my house at midnight, I'm like, yeah, I mean, of course I'm not getting up to get the door. Are you kidding me? What are you doing at my house at midnight? Go to the police or something. Well, I can't do anything for you. I actually turn off my phone at night. So you don't even call, let alone, you can't call me at midnight, let alone show up at my house at midnight. So when I hear this story, I'm like, yeah, well, of course, Jesus, why would anybody answer their door at midnight for a stranger? But their culture was so rich with treating people in ways that may inconvenience you to be there for them. You are still there for them. That he starts this story by saying, imagine a friend shows up at your house at midnight and you don't answer the door. And all of the Jewish folks that heard this story were like, what? Who would do that? Who would not answer the door at midnight? Who would say, my kids are already asleep and we put the food away? It's so different from our culture. And so as we're looking at these stories, it's important that we do the best we can, which is why I think I've become a real history nerd and cultural nerd, because I think in order for me to understand what's actually being said, I have to understand the world it's being said from, the culture it's being spoken in. Any of you watch the show Succession by any chance? Anybody watch? What? None of you watched? I mean, is it because it's HBO and they say bad words? Is that why? Well, I can't even. Gosh, man, it's worse than me not wearing costumes. Anyway. There are languages like if you've watched The Office as an example, right? There's ways that they speak to one another that you understand because you watch The Office, and it's way funnier to you. Simple, small things like Dwight saying that he's stronger than Jim makes you bust up laughing because you understand the dynamic of the relationship. And I'm saying to you that sometimes in order to understand these stories that we read from the Bible, we have to spend enough time not just reading the Bible, but maybe trying to find the time to discuss it with community and other people, like people with different perspectives, people with different vantage points, people who don't look like you, talk like you, vote like you, or think like you, that have a perspective on God in order for me to fully understand what's actually happening and being said. And of course, I think we need to do the work of, if we're actually serious about understanding these stories, do the work of actually finding out what the background is. Sometimes you get it at church, sometimes you don't. But I think it's important for us to understand it. So what we have happening in this story is that there is a village of people, a community of people who are experiencing something together. And they've been experiencing this thing together. Have you ever had a situation in your life where someone showed up for you, you were really, maybe you were sick or you lost your job or something like that? A couple years ago, I lost my job and I had a friend from SoCal come up the day after and took me to play a sport that I said I wouldn't mention anymore. And we hung out, and it was so impactful and so meaningful that my daughter, who was 10 at the time, I just went recently to go visit that same friend, and she said, are you going to visit him the same way that he came to see you when you lost your job? It was so meaningful that he just came and was present to my daughter, that this is going to stick with her for the rest of her life. Have you ever had that happen for you? Have you yourself ever been that person or had that happen to you? This is what I want you to do for the next couple minutes. I want you to turn again to the same group of people you talked about candy with. And I want you to talk about a time that you either showed up, you either showed up or had someone show up for you when you really needed them to. I'm going to give you like 5 minutes on this one, and then I'm going to come back. All right? All right, like one more minute. All right, all right, all right. All right, all right, all right, all right, all right. This is like so cool to me, like to see this. And I apologize to those of you that are watching online if you don't have the opportunity to enter into this. Like maybe you're watching this by yourself, which I'm sorry that that's how you have to watch it. It's COVID sucks. I mean, this is what it is. But I think it's important that we all like kind of understand that like church is not meant to be observed, but lived, experienced, like in this community that you are together. And this is why the small groups are such an important part of a church community, because you get to do this during the week. You know, sometimes it's just it's healing just to be with another human being. Like nobody's talking. Everybody knows what's going on. You know there's been a loss of job, or you know that the marriage is on the rocks, or you know that like the kid is sick, the dog died, the house is possibly going to be foreclosed on. You know, all these things are happening. You know that there's issues at work. You know that there's issues with racism and all these things in the world. We know that those things exist, but sometimes it's just good to like be with another person, with other people, to laugh, to cry, to sing, to dance, to watch the best team in basketball, you know, the Warriors play game. I mean, sometimes you just like, it's just good to be with people. And this is what you can offer each other. And in this story, woven throughout, we've got Jesus and we've got Lazarus, whose name coincidentally means God will help in Hebrew. And they live in a town called Bethany, which is a town that actually means, it has something to do with people being poor. So you've got like this community of people who are poor, and you've got this central figure whose name means God will help. And you have Jesus the light show up late to help. And when Jesus shows up to help, where the story left off last week, Jesus had called Lazarus' name, and Lazarus came to the opening of the tomb, and he's standing there, and he's totally in costume. He's wrapped up, and John, of all of the people who tell this story, John adds a unique element to this story that I think is fascinating, partially because John's an eyewitness, but John is explaining this story in a little bit more detail. He explains that Lazarus has a mask on. It's two parts. He's wrapped up in his body, and his face is also wrapped up. He has a mask on, and then Jesus says, to the community. Notice that Jesus doesn't walk over to Lazarus himself, and it's not because Jesus is a delegator. Not just because Jesus didn't have the energy or feel like going over and unwrapping. I mean, if you're the person who calls him out of the grave, you could also be the person who unwraps his grave clothes. But Jesus says to the community, go unbind him and set him free. The community does it. The community goes and is there. The community that was there during the grief is also there during the celebration. The community that's there when things go wrong is there when things go right. The community that's there when you're sad is also there when you're happy. Now, this is, maybe seems like it should be a no-brainer, but sometimes there's people who can be there for you when you're sad, but they can't be there for you when you're happy. I mean, you all know people that they're really, really happy for you. I mean, not happy. I'm sorry. They're really, really with you. Like when you're complaining at work about how it sucks there, but then like when you get a promotion, like they're no longer they're still in the misery, but you've moved somewhere else and they're no longer happy. They're not with you. They're no longer community then. But true community, real people, are the people who can be there when you're sad and when you're happy, when you're single, and then when you have a partner. When you ain't got no kids, and when you got 15 kids. When you buy the house, and when you have to move into the house. That's community, not the folks that are like, what are you doing next weekend? I'm busy. Why? Like that's the community is people like, what do you need? And I think that what we see in this story happening is that Jesus looks at this community of people and he says, hey, now you help resolve this hurt. You help heal this pain. Now you as a group of people, you come around and you complete the process you already started. You are already here. Now you continue it. You finish it. You help resolve the hurt. And so many of you in this room, metaphorically speaking, you're wearing masks and you're bound up in grave clothes. Of course you are. If any of us have been through the stuff you've been through, we would be too. Every one of us in some way, shape, or form has been through something that when we explain it to other people, they go, what? I've had things that I just kind of lived through because it's your life and you just kind of know, oh, this is what happens. And when I tell it to friends, I remember the first time this happened, we were talking about experiences that my kids had in school. And when we told our friends who we hadn't seen in a while, their reaction made me go, wow, I've lived through some stuff. My kids have lived through some stuff. So of course we walk around with grave clothes on, bound up. Of course we wear a mask sometimes. Of course we want to hide sometimes. But when you actually find a community of people who won't judge you, who will sit with you in your pain, who don't have all the answers all the time, who can say the following, man, that really sucks. Without going the extra to say, but Jesus? No, we don't need the but Jesus right now. We just need to know that someone else understands that what I just explained to them really sucks. It helps us take the mask off because we feel safe. In fact, the community takes the mask off for us. The community says, hey, it's cool that you have this struggle, that you have this thing, that you go through this, that you've been through this, that you have this tendency. Of course you do. You've been through a lot. But now we're here to help you. Now we're here to gather around you. Now we're here to help make you whole. I don't know why I'm telling you guys this story, or not story, but this fact. Then we're going to pray. The worship band can come up and play softly underneath me because I hate that I say that too. You can play loud. Now, don't play loudly because it doesn't make any sense. But anyway, there's this. I was kind of looking at the history of Halloween just to kind of understand the weekend that we're in, and the origin of the costume thing is interesting. Does anybody know the origin of why we wear costumes, by the way, on Halloween? No one knows? Oh, God, I feel so smart right now. There was this time of year where ancient folks believed that it sort of created an opening between the living and the dead, around when it got cold and when it was starting to get cold and around harvest and whatnot. And so these people, it's actually kind of funny. They actually thought that by dressing up like spirits, when they went out, that the spirits wouldn't recognize them. That they would actually, that spirits would actually think that they too were spirits and leave them alone. So they would wear these masks and wear these costumes when they went out. And I wonder sometimes if we don't as people fall into some of the same, it sounds ridiculous if people would wear a mask to blend in, all right? To keep themselves safe. We think that's really ridiculous now because we know the ghosts will recognize you whether you dress up like a ghost or not, surely, right? I guess although zombies don't all the time. If you walk really slow and maybe that could save you in a zombie apocalypse. I'm just helping y'all left and right today. But it sounds ridiculous that they would think that, but I guess we all kind of do that in some way, shape, or form. We feel it's safer to be covered up in a mask. We feel it's safer to act like we're not scared when we actually are. It's safer to act like we have it all together when we actually don't. It's safer to act like we're not broken when we really are. For some of us that are men, we've been told our whole lives that it's safer to not say your feelings are hurt, just say you're mad. That mask of anger protects you from having to be vulnerable enough to actually share that you are indeed a human being who has feelings and feels things other than rage. For some of us that we feel like we have to be like the perfect parent. And we can never let the world see that we're like, or our friends or anyone see that we actually don't know what we're doing sometimes. We, in fact, can never let anyone know that there are times that we don't know what we're doing. Most communicators don't stand on a stage and tell you at the beginning of their talk that he has no idea what he's going to say or she has no idea what they're going to say, because we have to have the mask on that says, hey guys, I'm a professional communicator and what I'm about to say is going to blow your mind. This is what some of our social media platforms have done. We just show you our best selves. Like, I've watched people take 5 minutes to get the selfie just right. What if we had community that came to us and said, hey, you don't have to wear that costume. You don't have to wear that mask around me. I mean, hey, if that's gentle, it's like, hey, if you feel like safer with that, like we can take our time and eventually maybe get the mask off, but I just want you to know that like here with us in this group, like you don't have to wear that. Like you can be yourself here. You can feel what you feel, love who you love, be who you are, and it's all good with us. You don't have to act like you know more about God than you actually do. You don't have to act like you like the song, like you like the sermon. You're good. That is the kind of life-giving community that helps us resolve, helps us come to grips with. And notice I'm not even saying heal all the time. Our unfinished hurt. Because some hurt won't ever be finished. And that's okay. And that's why there's community, because community helps us carry the load of that unfinished hurt. Here's the last thing I want to ask you to do. It's a little bit scary. It's Halloween weekend. It should be. I want you to, with the same group of people you've been talking to, as the band plays something other than softly. I just don't like the word softly, but that like you share something going on in your life where you need divine intervention. And you can pray or you can not. It's up to you. It's up to the group. Up to what you guys decide to do. You can pray for that situation or you can go, yeah, that really sucks. We can just be with each other today. All right, the band's going to play. You guys share some things. And again, for those of you that don't feel all the way safe being like, here's all that's going on, you can say, hey, I got some stuff that's I'm not ready to share right now. Just know that it's heavy. Grace and peace to all of you.